Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. So in this video, we're going to follow on from one I created a few weeks ago that was looking at sending data from Power BI, so from your Power BI report, to OpenAI, then ask with a prompt, and then returning that data and the response into your Power BI report. So in the example here, we've got this list of work orders, and one of the fields here was a defect report. So when somebody first created the work order, they filled in a defect report, and we wanted to be able to assess the quality of this defect report, so we could use it as use the response as training to help improve the quality of the information that was getting entered. And we can see here, this is the response here, a general assessment, some coaching tips, and then ultimately a final rating between 1 and 3, and this one gets a rating of 1. So we can actually quantify the actual quality of the data that's actually entered here, this free text data here. So that's a quick overview of what we did in the previous video. I'll leave a link below. In this video, we're going to go and just build on it and address some of the gaps that I never had a chance to address in the first video. So the first thing we want to look at is basically controlling how many work orders get sent to OpenAI. Okay, so in the previous one, the number of work orders that get selected here in the filter context is the number of work orders and the data that gets sent to OpenAI. So if I click on this button here and look at this data, we can see these fields here that are associated with this button make up the data set that gets sent across. Okay, gets sent to PowerAutomate and ultimately sent across to OpenAI. Now, if we don't have a filter that's going to send every single work order that's here, and if we have already sent the work order, it's going to process it twice. Okay, no, we don't want that. We just want it to process it once. Now, we could go in and delete it from the actual SharePoint list, which stored the actual responses if we wanted to get it reprocessed. But for this example here, we just want to send it off once. So let's start by addressing that issue there. So there's a couple of things we can do. The obvious one we can do is put a bit of a filter on here. So what I've done is I've kind of just built on the previous report slightly, in that I've created some calculated columns here. And the first one I've created is this one here, which is called defect report assessment status. Okay, so if I just open it up, it's a calculated column. And essentially what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to create a variable which is the number of assessments. So we've got a relationship between the work order here and the SharePoint list. So that's a table that stores the responses. We've got a relationship there based on the work order ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all count the number of rows in the work order AI QC table for the specific row in the work order table. Okay, now the grain of the work order table is going to be the work order number. So essentially we're going to count how many related reviews there are in that table. Now we need to put this calculate here, remember, and that forces a context transition so that you do actually count the number of work orders in the work order AI QC table that's related to the work order in the work order table. Otherwise, it's just going to count the total number of records in this work order AI QC table. So remember and put that calculate in. So once we've done that, if the number is greater than 0, it's going to be assessed. Otherwise, it's going to be unassessed. Okay, so if we've got a record in that table, it's going to be assessed. Now, there's probably other ways we could do this, but this is what I've done here. Right, so once we've got that, we can then go and pull this in here. Now, I'm going to get rid of this, tidy up this table a little bit, just because we don't want to see this massive bit of text at the moment. And I'm going to pull in this defect assessment. Okay, so we can see now we've got this defect report assessment status, assessed, unassessed. So we've only got one that's actually assessed at the moment. And then we can pull that in as obviously a filter. Now there's two things you can do. You can add it as a standing filter here so that you only ever see unassessed work, or you can add it in as, so to do that you'd need to add it into the page filter here, okay, and we only will ever see unassessed work. So if we press this button, it's only ever going to be unassessed work orders that get sent across. So that's one way of doing it. The other way you can do it is we can, if we do want to actually be able to toggle between the two of these, we can add it as a slicer, obviously. So let's add in a slicer, and we'll just tidy this up. Okay, so here we've got one up here, which is a filter between assessed or unassessed, and you can obviously then go and use that, and that's going to apply a filter to the data that gets sent across here. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a message next to this button here that provides some feedback on the number of work orders that are currently selected and how many of those are assessed and unassessed. So to do that, I've done a couple of things. The first one I've done is well, we've got this work order count here. That's going to just effectively count the number of work orders in the current filter context, so that's fine, that's all there. And then we've got this here. It's a measure that counts the number of rows in the current filter context that are unassessed. Okay, so that's a number of work orders with no defect reporting assessment. And then we are going to, and that obviously uses this defect reporting assessment status there. And then we are going to create a measure which has actually got some text in it. So this text is going to pull in some of the measures that we've just created here. So you have, and then in brackets or in ampersand, so concatenate, and then it's work order count. So you've total number. This is the total number of work orders we have got selected, and then it says number of work orders with no defect assessment plus 0. Okay, so if there's none, then it's going to return a blank. So we want to actually have a 0 there, and then we're going to say of these are unassessed and will be sent for review on clicking the button below. Okay, so that's the message there, and we go into the button, and then we'll open this up and then go to the title, and then in this title here we've got this FX button here that allows us to determine that title using a measure. And then in here I'm going to just search for TXT, and that's going to pull up this button here, this measure here, sorry, and then that should pull it into here. Right, great. Now there's only a certain amount of space that you've got available. It will eventually start to wrap it, so let's move that across, and we'll just tidy this up. Okay, so it's telling us here we have 50 work orders selected, 49 of these are unassessed and will be sent for review on clicking the button below. Right, now ideally I'd maybe want this actual, something on here, but at the moment this can't be, this text here can only be hard-coded. So if I go into the actual button text here, we can see that there's text for default, there's text for hover, there's text for selected, but there's no FX button here that can actually drive this actual text here. So we're stuck with that for just now. I'm sure that'll come in the future, but for just now, we've just got that that hard-coded text we can put into there. So that's the next thing. So first of all, you can filter. Second, you can provide a little bit of feedback here as to how many work orders are going to get sent across. Now, the next thing we can do is go into the actual PowerAutomate flow and make sure that we can filter out any work orders that are passed across that have already been assessed. So we'll go and do that next. Okay, so let's go in and we will update the PowerAutomate flow. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go to this button here and go to the fields that's associated with this button and just make sure that this defect report assessment status is passed across, because we're going to use this defect report assessment status in a condition in the flow to decide if something goes to OpenAI or just gets skipped. So just make sure that's in there. And then we're just going to go into the edit mode here. Okay, so here's the flow that we've been using here. So I'm going to open that up. Right, so I made a couple of changes here before we go in and add the condition. Now what I've done is I've used these compose actions here, and they're really just a place where you can put some text. Okay, now it just helps to make the actions later on, if they're using text, a little bit easier to maintain. So what I've done is the system message has been put in here. So this is the message that will get sent to OpenAI as a system level message, and basically it determines how it acts in general. Okay, so you're an expert in maintenance work management. Then we've got the user message. Now that's the prompt that we covered in the previous video that will be sent across, and I've just put this little bit at the bottom here. The text to review is here, so that'll go in the prompt that we send across, and then we're going to append the text that needs to be reviewed. So I'll show you that in a second. And then we've got the OpenAI key here, so I'm not going to open that up because I'm going to be using that. and then we're going to go into what we've done so far. So at the moment, what we do is we've got this applies to each, and then we pass it the data that we send across. And regardless of whether that's been assessed or unassessed, it's going to go and process this data by, first of all, calling the large language model here. Now, what I've done, just to let you see this update from the previous one, if you're following along with the video, this output here is now the OpenAI key, and the content, and I go through this in a lot of detail here in the previous video, but the content here for the system message is going to be whatever we've got in this compose system message, and then the content we've got in the compose user message is going to be the prompt, and then this is going to be the data that we're going to pass across, and that's from the applies to each work order. So the data that's in here applies to each work order in this data here. So basically the rows of data that's going to be passed across. So that's as it is just now, and then it goes through and parses the data and then adds the record to the SharePoint list. Now, what we want to do is we want to add in a condition so that we can only pass across or only carry out these steps if the work order assessment status is defect report assessment status is unassessed. Okay. Now, the way you do this can be a little bit fiddly, so I'm just going to talk you through it really slowly. So the first thing to do is we need to take a copy of each one of these. Okay. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to copy this to my clipboard. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to copy it to clipboard. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to copy it to clipboard. Now, if we go to add a new action, we'll see there's an option here to basically paste it in from the clipboard. So that's what we're going to do in a second. Now, what I'm going to then go and do is add in a new step here. And it's going to be a condition. Okay, now actually, the condition is already there. You can search for it, but this is the one we need. Okay, it's under the control, part of the control section, and it's this condition here. Okay, so we've got a condition, and in here, we're going to pass across the field that we actually added to the button, which is this Power BI data defect report assessment status. Okay, so it's already put that condition within and applies to each, so that's fine. And we then open up the condition here, and if that value is equal to unassessed. Okay, if it's equal to unassessed, we're going to go and carry out some steps here, otherwise it's going to go in here. So the next thing I need to do is I need to go in and I want to delete this first of all. Okay, now for a number of reasons. First of all, if I go and paste this in here, let's just do it from the clipboard. I paste it in. It does jump about a little bit here. It's going to be called HTTP2. Okay, so I just want to keep it the same name, and that's going to make things a little bit simpler. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go and actually delete these. So I'm going to delete that one. And in fact, actually, I think you've got to do it in a sequence, because if there's anything that actually uses this in a subsequent step, you need to take that into account. So actually, you've got to go into this one here, and I'm going to delete these. It's kind of to protect you from deleting stuff by mistake that is then going to break your flow. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and delete these in sequence. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add an action, and then we're going to add them back in again. Okay, and I'm going to open this up. Now, before we go any further, we do need to take a look at this. Now, each of the different dynamic bits of text, we just need to make sure they're referring to the right prior action. So this one here, we can see compose OpenAI key. So the compose statements will be fine because we've not changed the description here. This is fine. Now, when it comes to this one here, defect reporting, if you can see here, we've got the applies to each work order is the step that it's taken this defect reporting from. Now, that was the name of the applies to each before, because I'd actually updated that to make it more specific. So what I'm going to do is we've got this applies to each here. I'm just going to go and add that back in again to make sure that it's taking it from the right place. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to click back in here, and I'm going to go and find this defect reporting and make sure that's in there. And then if we hover above it, we can see it's now taking it from the applies to each that is here. Okay, so just be aware that that's the case. For some of the actual actions, you need just, if you're copying and pasting them between sections, and they used to be part of an applies to each that had a different name, then you just need to make sure you go and update that, because it can be a little bit fiddly. So let's add another action here, and we'll go back to clipboard, and it's going to be the parse JSON. Now I think that's fine, because the body here is from the HTTP, which is this one here, and it's the same name as before because we deleted the other one, so it never appended a 2 to there, which it might have done had we left the previous ones and added these in before we deleted those. So just be aware of that. And then we're going to add in another action here, and this is going to be where we update this SharePoint list here. Now this choice is fine as well. Holder for response from OpenAI API, which is this one here, so it's fine. It's taking that information. That's essentially the response we've got from the large language model from OpenAI. Now the reason there's multiple choices in here is because it's a chat that we're using, and there could be multiple chats. Now in this example here, there's only going to be one, so it's fine. And then we'll go in here and just double check. Okay, so this applies to each work order again, so we just need to update that work order description to make sure that it takes it from this section here, which is part of this applies to each here, rather than the previous one, which is called applies to each work order. So we'll go in here and we'll scroll down and we'll go for the work order description, and then the work order number we'll have to do the same with. So let's go down here and we'll get the work order number. Okay, we'll just hover here, applies to each and applies to each, and the content is fine because the name here hasn't changed. Okay, so it's still taking the content from this this JSON here. Right, so let's save it. See if it gives us an error message. No, it looks good. Okay, so that is us. So it's a fairly simple update, but you just got to be a little bit careful when you're actually copying and pasting using that clipboard, because we don't want to have to go in and recreate all of this. Okay, and then we'll go to save and apply, and then we're going to go, yep, successful there, and then we'll go back to the report. Right, so we can test that this is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to select, by holding down Shift, I'm going to select 2 work orders that are unassessed, and I'm going to select 1 work order that's already been assessed. And we can see here the message, you've selected 3 work orders, you have 3 work orders selected, 2 of these are unassessed and will be sent for review on clicking the button below. Perfect. So let's trigger that. Okay, so we're back in here now, and we're just going to go and click on the flow, and we can see everything looked like it runs successfully. And then let's just go to the applies to each and the condition. Okay, so we can see here the first input was false. Okay, so it's false, so nothing happened here. Okay, it just went to this no and then nothing happened. And then we go to the next one, and it was true, so it went through and carried out these steps. And then the next one was true and it carried out these steps as well. So that should mean that if we go to the SharePoint list, we should see the work orders, as well as the original one, which was number 2, we should see 1 and 3 as well. Okay, so here's us in the SharePoint list, and we can see here we've got these additional work orders there. We've got the one for repairing a dishwasher, we've got another one for a faulty wiring in a living room. So let's then go back to our report, and we can see that all of these have now been assessed. Okay, so one final thing I'm going to do on the flow side is I'm going to actually introduce an actual automated refresh. So I'm going to go back in to edit this. So what we can do is at the end of this, the final step here, if we go in and edit this, is that we can add an action to go and automatically refresh the semantic model once it gets to the final step. So we'll just go, after the applies to each has been completed, we'll go to a new step, and in here we're going to type in Power BI refresh. Okay, so still says data model here, data set here, but it's fine. Refresh a data set, and then we just need to go and choose the workspace and the data set we're going to refresh. So I need to make sure that this is published. So I'm going to go and publish this. I'll delete this for just now so I can save it. Okay, I'm going to publish it to this maintenance and reliability workspace here. We can see here it is here, so that's great. And I just need to add it into the app. This one here. And then make sure it's visible in the audience. And then I'm just going to save that, update app. And we can see that's visible there. Okay, now let's go back to our report. Now, in order for this to work, the other thing I had to change was this work order data here needs to be in a place that's accessible from the Power BI service. Okay, so I've actually just added this table here into SharePoint. Okay, so you could add it to another place that it needs to be in a cloud-based location, so SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, or ideally in your whatever that is you store your data. This data needs to be available, so just bear that in mind as well. It's a little bit outside the scope of this work to go into this in too much detail, but I've just stuck it into SharePoint, and that should be fine. Right, okay, so let's just again test this to make sure that that final step works. So I'm going to go into Edit, I'm going to add that new step here, and now I should be able to see the workspace, which was maintenance and reliability, and then this one here. Case study linking to this OpenAI, and then I'm going to save that. Right, okay, so save and apply. Okay, so in this example here, I'm going to go and select another one. So I'm going to do this third one here, this work order number 4. I'm going to send one work order. I'm going to click this trigger here. I'm just going to wait a few minutes. I'm going to actually flick across to our report, and then just go in and just make sure that everything's working fine in the actual flow. This is what we're looking for. Perfect. We can probably here, let's have a quick look at it. And everything looked like it was fine. So let's refresh this page. So you do need to refresh the actual page, but the underlying report hopefully should now have work order number 4 sitting at assessed. And here we go. Okay, because we did that automatic data refresh, dataset refresh or semantic model refresh, once the actual steps were completed, it's actually updated that automatically, which is great. Okay, so that is part 2, which is really just a little bit of tweaking of the PowerAutomate flow to make sure that the logic's there and it works properly. In the next video, we're going to look at a bit of prompt engineering, and we're going to improve the prompt that we send to OpenAI, because we've got a couple of issues that that I've come across. Okay, so I'll talk to you in the next video.